I can see now why people have, um, what do you call it? Like multiple monitors.
Oh, like do stuff.
Because I'm trying to look at like 3 different screens. Okay, how do I do this? Okay, there it's live.
Oh, and this is like live through.
It's live, but until
YouTube?
I put a link out, like no one's
Okay.
gonna watch.
Yeah.
This is more of a test. Like Twitter is more of where I do my professional social shit. So I'm not gonna put that out there yet, just to see how the setup goes. Okay, how do I do a link? Son of a bitch.
Oh, it's interesting. There's like a lag.
Yeah. Yeah, I've learned a whole bunch of new stuff about all this technology recently.
Well, this is the shit that's cool because I mean, like, obviously you had like a few of the pieces of this equipment, but like,
it's crazy what you can do.
You can set up this like whole studio in your apartment for like not a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, you can like this microphone is pretty decent. Okay, how do I get a link? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess it's just like keep cranking content. I think the hardest part is like doing it all the time.
Yeah, well, for sure. And then I think that's the thing is you must just like get your like banter down a little bit, and you can like respond faster to people and like keep the conversation going or direct the conversation or whatever.
Yeah, it's sort of like the like I did so much like public speaking at Sparks and Honey because we did that like briefing every day, and I got used to how to do that. But like doing stuff without an actual audience like in front of you is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, it's weird. We've actually started doing some webinars, and it's like such a vacuum. It's such a weird vacuum. Like, and I've also been a couple times to give presentations at somebody's office, but like the majority of the room is listening virtually.
Yeah, we do that a lot at work.
I'm sure it's crazy.
Okay, now it's on Facebook. I hate it. Well, video is better than conference calls, though. Like we do so much video chatting at work now because it's like built in. But conference calls are terrible because you have even less context about what the people on the other end of the phone are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And like now everybody's on like multiple devices, and then there's those like awkward situations where several people actually keep stepping on each other, and then everybody goes silent. Yeah, it becomes very strange.
I know, we do it. Okay, that sounds so good. My voice in the headphones sounds better than how my ears hear it. Okay, there's that. Okay. I can't get distracted by I go to OBS. All right, so I don't even know what your title is now.
All right.
I tried to look it up, but I've been.
I mean, it sort of goes in a couple different ways. But if you believe that there's a thing called PSFK Labs, then I am the president of PSFK Labs. Otherwise, I think we refer to it just generally as the sort of research and strategy side of the business. And then I guess I should start calling myself a partner in the business. We'll see how
You've been there a really long time.
It's been 9 years now, which is ridiculous.
What's been the biggest change? Because like PSFK has evolved a lot, like when we were there, and then it's been so many years since then.
I guess. I mean, it's funny because our process has sort of like maintained a pretty consistent level of, how we sort of get from point A to point B. But I would say that the level of sophistication in which we and the depth at which we sort of approach most of the stuff that we do is has continued to sort of evolve and grow over time. I think the what our clients expect from us is also a little bit different, because I would say that originally it was just sort of like, okay, tell us what you sort of see happening now and how that manifests in the future, and then sort of stop there. And now it's a lot more of like connect the dots to help us actually understand like what that means for our business. And so, but we also sort of we're very much naive sort of whisperers, I suppose, because we don't, we'll go so far as to, we know the basics about a business, and we know if we talk to sort of like key stakeholders within a company, we know what their sort of objectives are and what their sort of perspective is, but we're also sort of taking off the shackles somewhat and just trying to say like, hey, you should do these things.
So for people who don't know, there'll be a description of what you do, but what would you say PSFK does?
So right now we position ourselves as a business intelligence platform, and obviously that's fairly vague, but it's always been about sort of new ideas and innovation, and it manifests in a couple different ways. My sort of job aside for the moment, there's a website which is now was free and sort of editorial focused at one point in time. Obviously you had a hand in shaping that way back when. Now it's less, you can still get on the site if you're not paying, but there's a paywall. And
so paywalls are funny because like I feel back when I was at PSFK and at that era, like no one thought paywalls would work, but I think they're working now. And I think paywalls, and then also like microtransactions that are happening on like YouTube and stuff, just because there's so much content out there that it's like, for me, it's worth it, like paying a little bit of money to know you're getting something good.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're right, because I think like, and for me, the things that I pay for now are content entertainment primarily. I guess, indirectly through work, I'm paying for sort of like traditional like news media stuff. But, it's as much about, I guess with like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Spotify or whatever, you're basically paying for this catalog of information. And in some ways, that's what we're trying to offer as well, which is there's the content, which, obviously ages at a certain point, but there's that sort of like daily mix of articles that are still going up with the same intention of like, here's a bunch of interesting curated ideas of things that are happening in the web.
It's really like a research tool. I think that's how I would approach it, and probably a lot of the people that use the service, they're not just reading for fun.
Exactly, and that's sort of it's unless you're. I don't think we attract that many casual users necessarily. It's more so, and that was one of the recognition. One of the big recognitions in terms of the business, because obviously, as a niche publication, there was an intention at one point in time to sort of go to try to grow the audience and become more of sort of like a lifestyle publication.
Right.
But it was never going to be a consumer we're very much B2B. Like there's never going to be a way to monetize the site in that way. And so now we're catering to that sort of core audience who is primarily brands and agencies who are coming, like you said, to use the site as a research tool. And now we're trying to like build up the sort of types of content that we offer, and then like tools related to that as a
So you guys just launched something. It's like research on demand. What's the name? There's some.
So it's chat. We're calling it Chat Researcher right now, which is basically, and it's interesting because I was actually just talking about this today with someone, because previously, over time, as like the speed of everything has increased, there's always been a desire amongst clients or people that are willing to pay money to have access to this sort of quicker hit information. And from a business, we always were hesitant to sort of move into that space because, we wanted to make sure that there was a level of sort of thoughtfulness and consideration behind it.
Right.
And also, like, how do you charge for that, and what is the sort of like relevance of it? And so now, if you join at a level at the premium level, essentially, I feel like Jeff Weiner talking about.
We can get him on the phone in the future. I don't have that set up yet.
You can basically ask a directed question where we will go into basically there's sort of PS of K, the public facing side of it, and then there's sort of like phantom PS of K, if you will, which is like the raw research database, and we'll pull together a quick and with a level of analysis and polish report that basically responds to that question.
Right. It's not like a full-blown client report. It's not the free access.
Exactly.
It's really great though. I feel like that really fulfills a need because, like, 9 times out of 10, for something I'm researching, I don't know, there'll be like some official trend report about millennials or report about Gen Z, but like won't be the specific thing that I want to know, and that seems what that is.
Exactly, and I mean, I think the thing that we're, still there's that sort of perception and challenge that we have about the types of questions people are asking. Sometimes people will be like, tell us what like Latino millennials think about the auto buying experience, and we're not necessarily going to be the ones who are going to answer that question.
Right.
We can find some stuff, but it's not really what we do. However, we can say, like, here's a bunch of interesting articles about how different companies are being progressive about improving the auto buying experience, and you can take that inspiration and then go to your whatever demographic agency and like understand what they are interested in. And
those like demographic agency reports are the most boring thing in the world, but I love them because they're so horrible.
Right.
And I love also the false distinctions of that, like Hispanic youth are going to be radically different than everyone else.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, So I was having this conversation. I was at a friend's baby shower the other day, and I'm 41. I assume, are you 41 yet? Or
yes, I forget, but I am.
And then there was like a bunch of people in their mid-30s who are technically sort of on the edge of millennial, like the outer edge of millennial, and then there were some like 20-somethings there, and it was like talking about, the conversation came up where no one necessarily. I mean, I guess I'm comfortable being a Gen Xer. I don't really have any reason.
We're technically right on the edge.
I know. Also, and so no one really wanted to own their sort of lane that they were in, especially like the outer edge millennials that are also on that sort of like 30 plus. Like, didn't want to define themselves as millennials because it's just become such like a dirty word almost.
The history of it is fascinating.
I'm sure you know way more about this than I do.
I think I studied it because I hate how pervasive it is. I tweeted about this a while ago, but there was a report I read, and they were like, millennials are 13 to 54, or something like that. It was basically everyone's lumped into it. I mean, the thing is, like, generations are useful to some degree because there'll be some similarities, but millennials, as it's defined now, of like 18 to 34, that's like 4 different life stages. And because the world is different now, you could fluidly be on the older end and actually show some of the characteristics of like the younger. And so I just hate when people see these reports at face value and they're like, yes.
Exactly. I mean, it's not, I mean, I guess you're right. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like another tool in your arsenal. I don't know. I mean, so there's this woman, and I don't know her name, but she's been touting this idea of what she calls the perennial. Are you familiar with this at all? So it's basically it's her, and this was probably within the past like maybe 8 to 12 months that she published an article in a newspaper, basically, and it was saying that by virtue of the fact that technology has sort of changed everything, and we're
Right.
all, I mean, even if you're growing up in it, you're still, it's still fundamentally a different way of being a human, I suppose.
Yeah, it's
and
radically different.
so she's, and her assumption is that, like, it's just, like, erased those sort of generational divides to a degree. And I think it's, like, super interesting. I mean, and this is just random. I didn't even talk to the guy. He came into our office today. But there's a publication called Ageist.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this
No.
at all? So it's basically the anti-AARP is what he refers to it as. And it's celebrating sort of, older folks who are, probably like boomers who maybe have retired, and, typically that would be like, they're seen as less valuable in society. Right. And they're sort of celebrating, these people as still doing, like, amazing things. And, I mean, obviously people, like, the idea of retirement has changed so much and all of this other stuff. So I think it's just interesting, like, how
a perennial is that older person, but it's, like, recontextualized, like, they still have value. Like,
the perennial is just like it's like you, me, it's like the 18-year-old, it's like the, it's like it's sort of like the democratization based on technology is changing all of our expectations and just sort of the way we operate. And, like, we're still, I mean, like, I guess this is probably not a hard argument to make, but the fact that, what is it, 2017 right now, and the smartphone has only been around for 10 years, it's like probably the single biggest piece of technology in this century, but it's just changed everything for everybody, and we're still getting used to it.
It's crazy. I mean, so much has changed since 2007 when the iPhone came out, and then a lot of stuff has changed in the last 5 years. I've been looking at that recently. 2011 is when, like, a lot of things that are happening in YouTube now took off. So it's like YouTube stars. What else? A lot of other social media platforms, like Facebook, blew up. I think Snapchat came out.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like around, like, 2010, 2011 was when the second wave of, like, of social media came out, and that was, and obviously I'm not the right person to sort of talk about this thing, but there's, like, specific niche ways that everybody sort of, like, uses those, and most people probably are not on all platforms.
Right.
They sort of pick their one or two that they're really sort of interested in, and, like, go deeper down that. But yeah, it's like the sort of opportunities that they've created, and just the sort of, like, shift in behaviors is fucking crazy.
Yeah, let me think. So what's the one thing... All right, two-part question. So what's the one thing that you like most about what this technology has done for you personally, or something that you see out there in the world? And what's the thing that you think it's fucked up the most?
Well, it's an interesting question. I always feel like one of the ironies of the job that I've chosen for myself, or found my way into, is that I am tasked with often trying to contextualize a lot of this technology and talk about the sort of future or features that it can create, but it's not necessarily a future that I aspire to necessarily. However, I mean, that's not to say it's all bad. I just think, like, some of the ways that it's, that it theoretically manifests is just, like, fucked up. I think, I guess maybe I'll go negative first, because it's just I think the whole sort of privacy conversation is so interesting, and like, I'm such a lazy person. Like I'm aware of just the way that, and granted, I'm not like a super user of like Facebook or Twitter or, but like everything that I'm doing in some way, shape, or form is like being cataloged, and it's making these companies money. And like, if I think, and so for a company like Facebook or Google or what have you, there's like it's like that implicit relationship, if I'm using the right word, where it's like, I'm giving you this in exchange for being able to use your platform or whatever. And like, sure, maybe you're going to make my like experience a little bit better, but like, we're all essentially like a dollar sign associated with that. And then like, if I go to like a site like Amazon, where I am basically paying to give them my information and like my shopping behavior and all this other stuff. And like, it's like in some way I'm happy to do it. And it's fucked up.
I know. I think for me, privacy was something I was like deeply, deeply concerned about. And I'm still concerned about it, but like I'm kind of surfing it right now, just because it's so overwhelming to try to think of any kind of alternative. And I think there's small things that you can do to protect yourself, but also it's like the trade-offs. It's like not participating in these various ecosystems like Lachut, which a lot of people probably do, but it's just I don't know. It's all these things are so easy.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine life without Amazon.
Exactly. I mean, it's a funny thing because it does like it. There is, it's a privilege to be able to sort of not participate in them in some ways. I mean, if you talk, or like, I guess like the dystopian perspective is that the rich and privileged are the ones that can sort of afford privacy, and then everybody else just like becomes a product of the system that is sort of like out there.
Yeah, we've entered into a strange era right now where it's kind of, it's not utopian by any means, but it's for people who are above a certain economic level, life's pretty good, but we're literally also living in several dystopian narratives. Just if you think about the level of surveillance and things like that.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like, it's sort of, I don't know, it's funny because I think especially where privacy is concerned, there's things, if it doesn't directly impact you, and I guess like, and again, this is like sort of lazy attitude, but I don't necessarily feel as though anything that I'm giving up right now is that sort of worrisome, but who the hell knows? I mean, God only knows what is. But like, I see the sort of, when the dots get connected in a particular way and you're able to sort of make inferences about people, which, in the hands of these companies is sort of, it's like, it's not, they're not insidious ultimately. They're trying to sell you more stuff.
It's like only when really the disaster scenario happens is it really bad, or if you somehow made an enemy.
Right, exactly. But like what was I going to say? So I don't know. But that's the part that I think just like, and we're so early stages right now that it is sort of, it's too early to say what if it's going to be bad or not. But I think like, that's the thing that continually comes up, because it's always like data is like the currency of.
Have you read Everyone Lies?
No, I haven't. Tell me.
It's I have the book over here, but it's a book by an ex-Google engineer who looked at search data and looked at like things like, men who say they cheat or something. And he basically looked at like what people say in polls versus what the numbers say in Google data, and it's crazy. It's a really good book, and it should.
Oh, interesting. So it's like your search history is like a truer representation of your.
Yeah, and these are scrubbed back from personal details, but it's like looking at like what people search for, and if you can tell if it's like a man or woman, versus sort of like what the polls would say. But this is a really good point. You said data is ultimate currency, but like, fuck data. Not this. It's a caveat. Data's great, but like if you've probably experienced this. I've been around long enough that you just realize that everything is trying to prove a point, and so there's a book that I haven't read, but it's called like How to Lie with Statistics or something like that.
True. Right.
And I'm very wary of numbers because I think they're great, and I think data can be great. Love data. But it also can be manipulated like crazy, and depending on the point you want to make, and not that people are necessarily lying, but
but
people think it's like an cold, impartial, artificial intelligence force that has all the knowledge, and that's not true.
You can definitely spin it in the way to sort of support the narrative that you're trying to sell, and you know what I mean. To be frank, like when we're
sample size of 5.
Yeah, when we're we're not a quantitative agency, but when we're seeing stuff happening in the marketplace, like we find the statistics that back that up. I mean,
right. I mean, you have to though, because some people won't believe you.
Exactly. And
I think that's where you have to have both sides, because the observations out there in the world, the qualitative, that shows context, and actually it works together, and that's why it's important to have both. But like I think some people really believe that it's just like it's the numbers and that's it.
Right. Well, and that's the God. I mean, and obviously if we talk about elections or whatever, I mean, like those polling numbers, like just clearly were wrong. I mean,
that's where having the actual understanding of like how people feel on the ground versus what they said. Yeah, it's like the classic example.
But to sort of get back to the whole, because then when you mentioned like AI within there, and like, one of the things that I think is like fascinating alongside the, I mean, I guess like this whole reliance on data or collection of data is that it's meaningless unless you have a way of actually like interpreting it, and then the sort of the what's the right way of like saying this? I guess it's just like the assumption is that if it's being analyzed by an algorithm, that it's objective in some way. However, the more that I read about the sort of, there's still a human that has to...
The inherent bias.
Yeah, exactly. That has to design an algorithm, and so as a result of that, there's bias built into it from the beginning. And, it could be subtle and unconscious and, like, whatever else, and, it's just like that, but that stuff matters, and when more and more of that sort of interpretation is being outsourced, like, that makes, like, a big deal. Like, if you're talking about, making a decision that, says, like, yes or no for somebody on, like, getting into college or getting a loan or, like, whatever else. Like,
I mean, I think you were talking about the perennial book before, and about, like, the reevaluation of, like, older people. I think that one of the benefits of, like, having more older people is they have more context. Ideally, because I think there's a prioritization for many years on, like, having, like, youth and bringing millennials into the company and stuff like that. But I mean, I think there's a huge value in, number one, bringing in older people, but also bringing in people sort of from outside the domain, which I think a lot of people in our line of work actually don't come from the, that world, and you actually bring the outside perspective, which helps tremendously because you're sort of not narrowly focused.
Well, there's an interesting, the sort of, and not to sort of get on like the high horse of diversity, but I mean, it's like pertinent to this conversation, I suppose. Like from an age point of view or just a background point of view or like whatever, like when you start to think about, there's studies that have been done that have put teams of like-minded individuals together who have, worked together for a period of time and then put them up against, sort of intelligent people, but that are, perhaps more amateur, but have like a bunch of different backgrounds and point of view. And what they found is that initially it's sort of like an inverse graph where at the beginning, the teams that are familiar and think similarly together are gonna win out, but ultimately over time, it's the teams that like have like a bunch of different perspectives that come in to one another that suddenly will come up with the more interesting ideas ultimately. And it's like an investment, like that takes time. Like that's not gonna like make your company run better right out of the box. But I think that's probably one. I mean, it's in theory why some of these younger upstart companies, and again, some of them are not that diverse, but like are more equipped to sort of deal with things better because they have that baked in at the beginning, I suppose.
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge thing, diversity in many ways about like people on the team or diversity of thought about like the inputs that you take in, and that all of that is super important. So what's the most interesting thing you've seen recently in your research? The phenomena you can talk about. Something that genuinely surprised you, and I think it's very easy to become jaded when you're like looking at so many different things and you're like always looking at the new.
That's a good question. I'll sort of I'll stall for a second.
I can talk about the thing that has been most interesting to me.
Well, yeah, go for it.
Like the phenomenon of slime videos and slime in general. Like this is old news now, but I
don't think but it's not going away is the thing.
It's fascinating. You started seeing it start to happen maybe in the end of 2015 on YouTube, and like it blew up in 2016, 2017, and like I volunteered at like a school not that long ago, and the kids were like bringing in homemade slime, and like kids are getting busted at school for selling slime. And there's actually, I think, important reasons why it's so popular. I think it's because our lives have become so digital and we have lack of tactile sensation. So I love that story because like when you first show it to people, they're like, this is inconsequential. It's just some bullshit that kids play with. I think there's actual like reasons. It's why like ASMR is so popular.
You think the two are?
They're definitely related, yeah.
What?
Because you're kind of getting this secondhand physical sensation through media because you have a lack of tactile sensorial experiences.
Really interesting. I never really thought of it in that respect. I mean, God, that's like a sad statement on the world, actually. But
it is.
I mean, maybe I'm just jealous because I don't have that sort of like ability. But I mean, that's a funny thing because it's like. One of the things that everyone's like trying to do with digital content and media is to try to figure out different ways of like pulling in like senses to make it a more interesting sort of experience ultimately.
It's funny that like people are investing in like virtual reality when all people want is just play with slime or have someone whisper in their ear.
I still haven't. I mean, I know about the slime thing. I haven't watched a video. I know that like the thing that I think is most incredible about it, and I mean this sort of like goes back to the benefit of technology from is again like that anyone basically has this like ability to like suddenly have a platform, and I mean obviously what we've seen is that there's a lot of bullshit that results from that, like negative things and like whatever else. But like for people that are, as a community, like kids can start a business or like just learn anything they want, or it's just like that side of like the democratization of information. And I mean, I know that comes with like multiple caveats, but is like super interesting. And like kids are now like making tons of money like selling slime. You know,
it's crazy. There's one girl who's really big on YouTube. I think she makes a lot of money a year. She makes more than I do. She's like, I forget, but she's making a ton of money. But it's very hard work. I mean, I think it really is. I think it's easy to imagine some sort of life where you just make, but there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I guess that's the thing, and I mean, whatever. Maybe this like shows my age is like, I guess number one. I mean, maybe I haven't found the one thing that I'm like super passionate about that I want to just sort of get up there and share. But I think like maybe she is super passionate about slime. I don't know. Hopefully that like her life will evolve beyond that. But like still, it's like you said, to get that stuff started, it doesn't just like happen. Like there's a lot of legwork that needs to go into that.
Let me think here. Okay, so you've been at PSFK for a while. So people probably like know you for PSFK. If you search you on the internet, giving speeches, Twitter, and so on. But
I'm the worst at self-promotion though. So I mean, I think like
I think it's almost refreshing when people don't do that and like have not shadowy. That's the wrong word, but like a wispy existence. It's like they're too busy doing other things. I think that's actually pretty cool.
I mean, this was a conversation that happened in the same baby shower the other day. Was the whole like Twitter thing, and I mean, once again, like I don't know. I've never gotten it myself. Like I understand the value. I understand. It's like too much information for me, and like
Twitter's my RSS now.
Oh, see, I was actually having this conversation with someone today where I was like, because my RSS is basically newsletters, but I mean, it's still a pretty narrow point of view.
I really want to go back to an RSS reader, but there's not one that I really like. And my feeds are a mess.
Yeah, mine are ridiculous. I still, when I find, and it's rare that I actually find a new site these days, but like, I still have like one that I don't use other than like as a repository of like my RSS feed where I'll just like add the link anyways.
Yeah.
And like with the hope that someday that OPML file will get ported into something that I'm like interested in using again.
I remember back in the day, like collecting massive RSS feeds was like the shit. Like I don't know how many peers had, but it was a lot. And I thought I had a lot of feeds, and it was like paled in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I still like think back to those like early days when like I didn't know what an RSS feed was, but like I could have started off and cataloged them all, and I failed to do so, and now it's just never gonna happen.
There's too much out there now, and that's the Twitter I do because it's like usually other people who are curating things, and I have things that are like interesting too, so it's not just one side, but it's bad for organization.
Well, so this is an interesting question, so I will be curious to understand like how you, like what's your personal information sort of like way, like say on a normal day, what are you doing with all the shit that you're coming across?
So for like my general purposes, it's basically it's in my other computer, but I have like I think like 8 different tabs that I open automatically, and it's my Twitter feed, and I don't really do too much like filtering with like lists and stuff. It's just my Twitter feed because I can go through it quick. There's a couple of blogs that like people who are generalists on the edge, so I can kind of like look at that space. I look at Dig. Dig's still great because it's a combination of humans and algorithms. So Dig's always good. I have my RSS comes up, but I always close it immediately because it's too much. I'll look at what's trending on YouTube. I'll look at what's trending on Google. Generally, that's not super interesting because the algorithm's pretty basic as far as like what comes up. And then I have this site that like reports on like kind of like weird news. Just I'm trying to like color in the edges. So like I'll look like Google trending on like what's everyone talking about, sort of what's the internet talking about, and then sort of look at all those things. But I have less of a need to like produce content based on like what's happening now. But for my own enjoyment, I'll do that.
Right. And so how much time do you do you that like do you like how much deep reading do you do, or do you do like a lot of scanning?
I do more deep reading now because typically at work we focus on like one area. So I'll usually gather up a bunch of like longer articles or sometimes books, and kind of go deep. But I'll still do that like daily scanning just to kind of see if there's something new that's kind of popping.
Because it's funny, like I mean, I obviously love to go. So I love to go deep on stuff, but I feel like I don't. I feel like the stuff that I go deep on is the stuff that is the least relevant to my day-to-day job.
Give me a rabbit hole that you went down recently.
Well, it's less a rabbit hole. So I'll just quickly tell you, like, and I'm sort of like OCD about this, and maybe this is just something that I've developed. I probably have about 25 to 30 like newsletters that I subscribe to. And,
Okay.
It's like, and there's like my 2 or 3 favorites that are like the things that I sort of like read every day. And then there's just the stuff where I know there's going to be things that are going to be relevant for work. And it's a lot of scanning. And I've gotten like strangely adept at being able to just like quickly look at an article and like pick up the main points and then just like move on. And, for us, it's like, it's so that the filter is like if it's relevant from work, then it's just like quickly adding it to that like database, and then like the stuff that I'm interested in reading, I will add to Instapaper, and like that's just it's a disaster.
I know. I've got my Pocket account is just massive. Every time it tries to download my phone, I'm like stop it because it's like it's so huge.
It's unfortunate because it's like the only time I find myself like really reading Instapaper is like on the plane or something like that, but. Then, so those are like the 2 like main filters, but then I also have probably at any given time, I would say 50 tabs open on my computer, which is like also just very, it's like digital hoarding basically. And, that stuff where I'm like, oh, I need to, like, I try to dedicate at least like a portion of the day to closing out some of those, I would say.
I know. I have the same. I love digital hoarding is definitely a thing because I'll keep tabs open because I don't know. There's in some ways it's useful because it's like you might be thinking of something else and it like connects back to a tab you have open, but I don't know. Why do you keep them open?
I think it's just, in the tool that occasionally there's this tool called One Tab. Are you familiar with this? Where you can quickly, like if you have like a bunch of tabs open,
you collapse it down.
You collapse it down and it just like, it puts a date on it and then it's just like sort of like all the active links that are right there. The other thing that I have is like a thing which basically like turns off the active links. I can't even remember what that tool is, but it like... So it's not necessarily like running in the background, like taking your...
Tabs are supposed to be really like CPU intensive, I think.
I believe it. It's ridiculous. And so, when I need to do meaningful work, I will then just open up a separate screen to actually like just have that one document in front of me or whatever. But I think like the thing that is not the rabbit hole that I've necessarily gone down, but is like... I have like a deep list of things that I need to read on is Bitcoin basically is like... I
know, I feel like a fool because I've been like, tracking it because that's what you do, but I never bought any. I really should have bought some.
I know. I way back like in 2011, I interviewed one of the dudes who was like the first, like creators of one of the exchanges, and like may have even been rumored to be like Satoshi Nakamura, or is that his name?
Something like that.
Yeah.
No one really knows, I think.
But like, and I, stupidly, I was like, it was still when you could like have a single computer and like mine Bitcoin, and I like tried to do it, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was like, whatever.
I know. I had the same experience. Like we wrote a whole report about it at Sparks and Honey, and I'm like, it was so cheap. I think I bought Dogecoin, which was like a meme based cryptocurrency. I don't know how much that's worth now.
I mean, it's
goddamn fool.
It's got to be worth something. I mean, I just recently and even God, I mean, because Bitcoin is up over $6,000 right now, and whatever. I mean, if it's a bubble, it's a bubble.
Yeah, I question. I think the utility of cryptocurrency totally, but the fact that it's so inflated in relation to fiat currency or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not enough of an expert to really give an opinion, but it's a big question mark.
Well, that's the thing. Like, and I have a couple dudes that are like the ones that finally got me to like spend a little bit of money on it, and I mean, I got in the game late and am not that deep in it, but like,
that's the one thing that we do all this research about the future of industries, but I've never really messed around with stocks as much as I should have with all this knowledge.
I know. Well, that's like sort of that's the thing right now. If anything, that's one of my personal focuses is trying to get smarter about just money in general. And I feel like there's so many tools out there.
Fascinating.
And I mean, for like us who don't know that much. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I've just always been risk averse, but it's also like, fuck it. If like you don't put any risk out there, then
right.
I don't know. So that's like one of my personal goals right now is to try to like do some of this. Cause I mean, the problem is I think like with a lot of the work that I'm doing, it's talking about sort of like companies that are still startups and privately held, so you can't, I mean, I guess you can technically invest in them, but like with all the shit that we're talking about, like that should translate into some understanding of like
right.
what, I think it's just like taking that a step further and saying like, oh, everybody's moving towards autonomous vehicles, and because of that, like batteries are becoming such a huge thing, and like how can you figure out how to invest in batteries? And what I'm realizing is like the fools that got into like lithium stocks are like loving life.
You just have to have that mind for money. Like how do you trace it back to the bottom line?
Totally.
And we're goddamn fools. We provide all this information to these companies. They're
That's
probably
what
making
I'm saying.
a lot of money.
I mean, this is like one of the single biggest like things that I'm like, God damn, like why? I don't know. Anyways, it's fine. It's fine. Like not that
it's good though. It's good that you have the goal now of being more conscious of that world.
Because that's the other thing is I've always wondered like if there was like a parallel to like somehow, I mean, it's not a huge leap to sort of like then look into the VC world, like where they're looking very specifically at sort of like markets and trying to figure out like, and granted, that's like a whole other like inflated marketplace right now, but like not that I'm ready to sort of like move into that sort of role, but like, there's got to be a way to go from like talking about like the trends that are happening to then say like based off of this like, and then being able to marry that against something else.
We just need to find someone with money and then start our own fund, use our special skills to get in early, and then somehow you get a cut.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's
putting it out there. Anyone listens to this looking for an investor.
If we've sounded intelligent enough up to this point, then would love to have a conversation.
Listen, between the two of us, we've worked for like all of the biggest companies in the world, literally, pretty much. It's pretty funny to say that out loud.
I know it is pretty funny, actually. I mean,
so holler at us. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up soon, but you're not really on Twitter, but you're. I'll put a link to Scott's Twitter handle. Is there somewhere else that you want to talk to people?
It's it's a good question. I mean, I occasionally I go on Twitter when I get like a random notification, and I check to see that I think I've tweeted about 300 times over my.
It's pretty good.
over my life.
I was on
You were there for probably like my
peak
first
of tweeting.
early tweets.
You got to be careful though. Like, I was just on Daniel Edmondson's. If you're listening, someone hacked your Twitter. I'm pretty sure because there was a bunch of like watch tweets and some other tweets for like a vacation website. So I think sometimes if you leave things that happened to me, I had some Tumblrs that I came back on after not being on Tumblr, and like someone was posting to my Tumblr.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm sitting at what 921 followers right now.
That's pretty good.
Like I feel like if I could get up to 1,000, I'd feel like I don't know. That's like a metric that I've always thought would mean something.
I can't break 1,600. I just float at it constantly, but I don't really try. I thought about buying followers just for fun, but
well, see, that's like I would take that investment and like put that in like Bitcoin or something like that.
It's true.
Unless you can put those bots to work for you somehow.
I don't know. It's hard to be a social media star. Either you got to create awesome content, or you got to be on all platforms. Super interesting.
I mean, I went through a period where I deleted. So right now on my phone, I don't have any social media on my phone right now. No Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram.
That's amazing.
All that stuff. But I still find ways to waste my time like on my phone.
That's amazing. Without those, do you play games?
Well, actually, so this will be like maybe this will be like a good. So now I'm realizing like my biggest deep dive recently is I'm like really interested in board games actually.
Oh, yeah.
And not that this is like any new news that these are like it's like the biggest selling category on Kickstarter or whatever.
What's your big game?
I just bought a game which I haven't played yet called Scythe, which is so fucking nerdy, but it sounded really cool. And I was reading about it on Ars Cardboard, which is an offshoot of.
It's like Ars Electronica.
Well, it's Ars Technica.
Technica, yeah.
Ars Technica, but they do like board game coverage, and it's like actually quite.
I never knew that. That's crazy.
Someone turned me on to it recently, and there was just within the past, like in August, there's a huge board game conference called Gen Con, which is where everybody like releases their new games and then people play. It's like the CES of board games, basically.
That's so dope. I had no idea that existed.
But I bought that game and I bought Codenames recently, which I also still have not played yet. But that game's supposed to be dope. That's more of like a party game. But I'm like dabbling in trying to do my own game right now, so it's like studying up on that stuff, and then and I think like you're right, like to go back to the whole like slime thing, it's like people want a reason to like sit around a table and like hang out together. So
it's so true. I mean, it's like it's sort of why the Nintendo Switch. It's still digital, but like it's games that you can play together. Totally. And like I've been studying gaming recently. There's not a lot of games that you can play together in the same room.
And there was actually just an article recently on in the New Yorker about Dungeons and Dragons of all things.
I never played that growing up. I feel so like I missed out.
I know. I played it a couple times, and like I love the idea of it. Like they're trying to be smarter about. Ways to like make it easier for people to get into it who don't, but there's like such a thing right now as like professional dungeon masters who will just like you basically. I
shouldn't be surprised by this.
Will go and they'll just like run your like campaign, and then like you don't have to worry about it. So
all right, that's so dope. I'm gonna end on this note. We'll talk more in a future episode. Thank you, Scott Lachut, so much for coming.
Thanks, Dan Gould. That was awesome.
I'm playing my outro music. I didn't play the intro music, but I'll edit it in.
Okay, nice. How was that?
That was good. That was super interesting. Hold on a second. Let me just look.
That's awesome. Chris Rubino just sent me this. He said, Vin.
That's so funny. I don't have like a fade out, but let me see. Can I do a fade?